Welcome, everyone. And I want to thank you for joining us for the fifth and final webinar in our CSBA County Board Governance Handbook series, Bridging Policy and Practice series. I'm sorry, we just had a moment where our stand-up comedian, Chris Reefe, just shared a moment with us, and it worked. I'm smiling already, and perhaps he'll share one of his stories with the rest of you. Throughout this series, we've explored the roles and responsibilities of county board members, from understanding the purpose and structure of County Office of Education to shared governance, things like budgeting, uh, share other subjects as well. Today, we're going to turn our attention to a role that often takes place beyond the board meeting agenda, but it's essential to effective governance, and it's advocacy and community engagement. Today's panel, they know all too well what it means to advocate and engage communities. I'm excited to hear how they approach advocacy and community engagement and relationship building. So whether you're a new trustee or a seasoned board member, we hope this conversation provides ideas and inspiration for extending your impact beyond the boardroom and strengthening the connections that help students and communities thrive. So, by the way, I'm Mike Walsh, as Director of County Services here at CSBA, and I'm excited to introduce our panel in a moment. But first, if we can go to the next slide, as always, we have to start with housekeeping. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And so, Stimber, if you can go ahead and advance that slide for us. And apologies, we've been having some challenges. The reason Chris was delivering one-liners for me was because we've been having problems with technology this morning. And it's not in our fan of ours, but that's okay because we're going to work with it just the same. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. So housekeeping. Again, as you'll know, we would love to hear from you, get your questions, but because it's a webinar, we would love for you to put your questions in that Q&A section on your screen down at the very bottom, and just simply leave those questions in there for us. We will get to them from time to time. We'll just pull them aside and answer them, or we'll wait until the very end and we'll answer them as well. So just leave us a comment in the links, in that Q&A section, and we will get to you as soon as we can. So now I'm happy to go ahead and move on to our panelists. And so I'm excited. We have some folks here with us. One person is missing. We've been trading text messages. Again, technology, not our friend today. He's having some problems where he's at. But we'll do the introduction of those who are here because I'm excited about the three of you that are with me just the same. So Patrick O'Donnell, who is CSBA's Chief of Governmental Relations, Chris Reefe, CSBA Legislative Director in Government Relations, Annette Lewis, CSBA Region 14 Director and Board Member from Contra Costa County Office of Ed, as well as Dr. Ramon Flores, CSBA Director-at-Large in a county, as well as a board member from the Ventura County Office of Ed. And right now, Dr. Ramon Flores is having some challenges. If he can get in here, great, we put him in. If he doesn't, we missed him, and that'll be our loss. So what I'd love to do is, before we start moving into the slides, I'm going to ask each panelist to just do the favor, and we'll go in that order as we have it on the screen right now. And it's the opening line. Who are you? Why are you here? Right? So who are you? What's your title? And why are you giving up part of your day? You're both, the three of you. I was about to just pick on Patrick and Chris because I know you have work that you should be doing. And Annette, you always have work that you're trying to do. So yours is easy. So what I'd love to hear, though, is if you're going to give up 30 to 45 minutes of your time, I'd love for you to share with the audience, why are you giving up your time? Why is this conversation so important to you? So, and just take a minute or two and just share again. So who are you, the title, and why are you thinking that this conversation is so important that you take out your time to join us? And we'll start with Patrick.
Great. Thank you, Mike, for the invitation here today, and good to be here. Well, who am I? I'm Patrick O'Donnell, Chief of Governmental Relations here at CSBA. And so under the umbrella of governmental relations falls all things that we do in the state capitol, of course. That's bills, legislation, regulations, the pacers across the state, our 16 pacers across the state that engage county board members and school board members, and of course, Washington, D.C. And we engage in Washington, D.C. as well. And under that umbrella, it falls that falls under the GR umbrella. But why am I here? I'm here, yeah, it's my job, but it's also my strong belief that advocacy is key to the success of California school boards, California counties, county board members. It's essential that we engage. I always say if you don't engage, somebody else's advocacy is going to enrage you, right? So if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, you know this. So I cannot say how important advocacy is. And why do I say that? Well, I've lived it myself. Okay, I once, many years ago, was a local government official, and then was elected to the state assembly and was pushed, pulled, lobbied all the time by school board members and many other forces, some that might want to counter the force of school boards and county boards at times. So I saw what advocacy does on the ground, and I'm a firm believer that advocacy is one of the most important functions of a local or county board member. Yeah, you go to your meetings and you do that important stuff, but you also need to point your finger every so often at Sacramento and Washington, D.C. to try to impact and shape the policies that come out and ultimately impact you.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for being here, Patrick. And I joke about the fact that you're all busy folks, and that's a lot of sincerity in that. So I appreciate the fact that you're taking your time to join us. Chris, Reefe, when you're not doing your stand-up comedy, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what's here, why you're here, etc. Your turn.
So no, I appreciate it. Thanks. As a former legislative staffer for over 20 years, having served in a variety of different capacities, I've always worked in public education. Public education has been kind of the linchpin in terms of my work in the policy and fiscal world and in state politics. And kind of just to echo what Patrick said, right? If you're not at the table, you're on the menu, and that could not be more true. And so we continue and always advocate for our board members and have been, especially regarding our county board members and the unique roles that they all play and the unique roles that our county offices play. From a perspective of kind of this particular webinar, the amount of effort and time that it takes to ensure that legislators and legislative staff and others understand the roles and responsibilities of county offices because they are so uniquely different than school districts. That is a critical component of our advocacy and why your voice is critical to that effort because building those relationships and helping and translate those relationships into advocacy are critical to help further the mission and purpose of our county offices and the important work that they do.
Thank you. I appreciate having you here. And Chris, I have to admit, oftentimes we've had some conversations around legislation. I'm learning more and more from you as we have those conversations. So I am thrilled to have your voice in this conversation today as well. Annette Lewis, so CSBA Region 14 Director, thank you. Board member, Contra Costa County Office of Ed. And again, you and I have had some conversations as well about advocacy for a long time now. And so what I would love for you to talk a little bit about is, again, with all your busy things that you have going on, and I'm being sincere when I say you're a very busy person. And so I absolutely appreciate the fact that you are here with us today and sharing your time. So talk a little bit about why in the world that's so important to you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm going to give a shout out to everybody who's an attendee here. They're just probably as busy as I am, and I appreciate that they are here to participate. Why am I here? Because I think it's important that everyone understand the unique role, as it's been mentioned, that the County Office of Education and the county board members play in supporting students throughout the state. We are more than just a person representing our county office. We're representing the needs of students throughout. I've been doing this for about 8 years almost now. Before that, I was heavily involved with California State PTA. And as I was reflecting on some of the ideas that we were discussing for this webinar, I reflected on how this work has been going on for a very long time for me. There's 25 years roughly with the California State PTA doing the same type of work, working on behalf of the students. As a board member, I have a slightly different reflection than my other two panelists here, and you too, Mike, because as a board member, our role is to be that face of the county board and the county office. And we have to make sure that we are always looking out for what is best for our students, yet being held by the constraints of the laws and the codes that affect us. So I'm here to help guide our attendees in knowing ways that they can speak for the students in their community and make sure that they are taken care of in the best ways.
Perfect. You almost wrap. I could almost say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. And that just wrapped it up perfectly. And I think so. As you were describing that as a board member, thank you for that reminder. Everything that everybody has shared just now is really the reason why I even said I think this is the reason why the handbook exists. Right, is just to help us walk through these conversations and start to make some sense out of that. So, and let me go ahead and Simba, if you'll go ahead and take us to that next slide, and we're going to leave it up here for a little bit. And this is really, I want to talk a little bit about, as you just described it, Annette, the mission and everything that we're doing. So at CSBA, the vision is really about being ardent advocates. And I highlighted that word, that section in there for a reason, because I wanted to really draw everybody's attention to that. And I have to brag for a moment. I may or may not have been around in 2015 and 16 when these were both developed. And the conversations were pretty intense. We spent some time, and it wasn't about the wordsmithing. It was really about the importance of what words we chose. And so as you see in that vision, that we want our members to be ardent advocates. I always remember that word, the ardent, the conversation that we had around what the type of advocacy. I think that was an important part of it. And that once again, in our mission, we talk about education policy agenda. And I think this kind of goes back to Patrick and Chris, really around how we are trying to set that policy agenda for public education. And so it's in that vein, if you will, that I want to start this conversation. And I'm going to turn to Patrick and Chris. We're going to start with both of you. And Annette, you're welcome to jump in on this if you think they're getting it wrong. I mean, if you have something you want to add to whatever they're sharing. So tell me then the way I really want to start this, right? Because for me, this conversation is really like, how do we help county board members extend their influence beyond the boardroom to improve outcomes for students? So what I want to start is, Patrick, why do you believe advocacy is such an important part of a county board member's role? And you kind of started in on this, but I really want to let you spend some time opening up on that. And Chris as well, just jump in whenever you want.
Yeah, well, Chris alluded to it before, where he stated, well, county board members have a unique role, right? You're really a board member plus when you're a county board member, right? You're doing more than an LEA, a school district board member, right? Your role is much more expansive, but also much understood in the state capitol and also Washington, D.C. And I don't want to leave Washington, D.C. out of this conversation as well. But it's very important, again, that you help shape the policies that come out of Sacramento or Washington, D.C. You need to use your elected capacity to build relationships with folks for sure and make sure they know who you are, because often if they're going to see you as the expert, okay? If a state elected or a federally elected official has any worth, they're going to consider you the expert. They're not going to assume that they know much more than you. So it's important that you engage with those folks to share with them, number one, your mission, okay? And next, to advocate. So it's educate and advocate. It's educate as your role and your expertise, and then advocate for policies that will help you be successful in your mission.
I like the way you just made that clarification, that little nuance around educate and advocate. I think that's an important part of it. And it almost goes under the radar because we're involved in education, and oftentimes we forget that the new legislator comes in and they don't have the background that we may have, and is that opportunity for us to educate them. And I think there's a subtle importance around the education word versus where we go after them sometimes. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, I think. But Chris, what were you going to add to that?
I think one of the things that always comes up in my conversations with legislative staff is, it is a constant churn in relation to their, what is their lived experience with public education. Just in the last 2 election cycles, we've seen probably about 70% of the legislature turnover 2014, some folks have heard me talk about, or not 2012 more specifically, sorry. 2012 was the first year of the um, term reform going into place, right? So, legislators could serve up to 12 years
Mm.
cumulatively in either the Senate or the Assembly. That first class that came in under those term reform, have left office in 2024. There's a couple left because they just didn't get reelected, but at one point in time. But for the most part, they're all termed out now. And so, from that perspective, it is a constant effort to be able to continue to educate assembly members and senators about the important roles that not just that public education plays in society, but the important roles that school district and county board members play in that role, and how they work, and why do they work that way, and why do we structure it that way, recognizing how big our state is and how diverse our state is in terms of not just the needs of our students, but in terms of how the districts operate and county offices operate. And so it's a constant effort, right? You have to stay on top of that advocacy regularly. There's never a moment where you're perfectly in alignment. And that's why I always kind of say that advocacy is a matter of balance. Like, if you ever feel that your advocacy is in balance, it actually means that you are about to come out of balance, because balance is a constant state of adjustment.
Okay, you talk a little more about that last part of the balance, because I love that. And by the way, everybody, Ramon Flores has joined us. Don't be fooled. I said technology is not our best friend today. I'm Mike Walsh. He is Dr. Ramon Flores, even though his name on his screen, it says Mike Walsh. I have no clue what gremlins are out there working on us today, but we're going to fight through them. So, Chris, if you could go back a little more about that balance that you were describing, because I think one of the things that I learned early on was what you just described about how that turnover happens, and we now have so many legislators who don't know some of the things that we know about the history, things like the LCFF and the LCAP. And one of the things that I know is a challenge is when a new legislator comes in, if they don't have a familiarity around that, they may not understand the importance of it and why it's so relevant for us today. So could you talk a little more about that balance of in and out?
When some folks on this webinar have heard me tell this story, but I'm going to tell it again just for other folks who haven't heard it. When I was, I'll kind of give you an allegory. When I became a staffer many years ago, I went to a retirement event for a very well-respected colleague who had over 40 years of experience working in and out of the legislature. And I was lamenting to some colleagues that this person was retiring and that we were losing others, and where was the institutional history going? Where was, the folks who I looked towards as mentors in my personal career, who we can look to as senior staff? And my colleagues turned to me and said, "Chris, you are senior staff." And that was a really eye-opening period, because a lot of folks come and go in this business, and the longer you stay, right, obviously you create that institutional history, but more importantly, there is a churn, right? And there is folks do come in and go in terms of not just legislators, but legislative staff, and legislative staff play a critical role in the political environment that we work in, and making sure that you know who they are, you're developing relationships with them so that you can stay in touch with them and have connections, and also be able to get access and have influence when it comes down to critical issues. So that balance is a matter of constant adjustment, because you want to continually stay in touch with the legislative staff and the legislators, because they're going to come and go. Just the other day, actually, I ran into an old friend colleague who I know is a scheduler, for example. And somebody asked me, like, well, why do you need to keep a relationship with a scheduler? Schedulers in some respects are worth their weight in gold, right? If you cannot, if they open the doors for you, and so I do my best to kind of treat them with the utmost respect. And this particular individual just recently moved from one office to the other, and so I've lost access potentially to one office, which I have to redevelop, but I've gained access with another because I've maintained a good relationship with this person. And so that balance is critical to kind of not just the bigger pieces that we talk about in terms of advocacy before a senator or an assembly member or even the governor or even in Congress, but it's also the support staff and other folks who play a critical role because they help you get to that eventual goal.
All right. So I'm going to stay with this conversation. And Patrick, I'm going to bring you back in because you've talked a lot about DC. And I think that DC is an important part of this, but there's a lot of confusion, a lot of stuff, distractions, if you will. So what I'd love to know is what do you think, and Chris, don't go too far because you're welcome to stay in this conversation as well, but what are some of the most significant state and federal issues that you believe are affecting county offices of education? What and just talk about that. Let me stop and you go. What are some of the most significant state and federal policy issues that you believe are affecting county offices of education?
Right. Well, under the federal umbrella of funding, many things fall. First, there's IDEA, special education. In fact, we learned just yesterday that that is being shifted out of the Federal Department of Education over to HHS. They are now going to manage that program. We're not sure if they have the expertise to manage that program, to administer that program. So that's very concerning. Also, there's Title I, significant source of funding to many California schools, right? That has been under threat over the last couple of years. There's also a variety of other programs, migrant ed, some other programs that are potentially looking to, some folks are looking to cut or even eliminate this year. So again, it's very important that county board members engage at the federal level too, right? To protect these programs. Many of them, they receive funding from as well, or at least do support their local school districts. And I will cite one of the opportunities to do that is every year we have our coast to coast trip. We have county board members attend. It's very important that they do attend. We need them to attend. And that typically happens about mid-April. We had one just this last April, very successful. We had about 260 school board members, county board members from the state of California traveling to Washington, D.C. to walk the halls of Washington, D.C., meet with our legislative leaders there. Also hear from some of the experts on how best to advocate. Also hear from some of the experts on how the policies are evolving and changing in real time. So it's very important that folks engage at the federal level. Now, you don't necessarily need us to do that either. Call your local congressional office. Who's the most important person in that office to us, probably, other than the elected person, is the staff member that handles education. So call, probably going to be in the DC office. Call them and say, hey, I want to get a hold of, call your member of Congress. It could be your senator too, quite frankly, a senator. Say, who's the person in the office that handles education? Just call and introduce yourself. Hey, I always say educate and activate. Well, this is the education, right? You're educating them as to who you are and what your role is. Just simply educate them. What does a county board member do? Okay, well, I just want you to know I'm out there. I want to be a resource for you. Here's my email. Here's my cell phone number, maybe, or whatever you feel comfortable with. Call me if there's anything that I can help you with as the member of Congress is dealing with issues that are coming up. Okay, so that's the education portion, right? Now the advocacy, when I say educate, then advocate, okay, the advocacy portion comes when bills do come up, budgets do come up, programmatic shifts do come up, like we're seeing happen now, right? And maybe even some regulations, so that you have a person you can go to, they know who you are, or even in a better world, they can go to you before their member of Congress votes or opines on that issue in a committee hearing. So again, very important to, as I always say, educate and advocate. First, educate, let them know who you are, what you do, and then move into advocacy mode. And as Chris shared, it's a constant throughout the year. You should be touching base, okay, throughout the year. Now, maybe you travel to C2C, maybe you go to DC on your own. Those are great times too, to just stop it and spend 15 minutes in an office and remind them who you are and build that relationship.
And Chris, you had said earlier about that. You've discovered that all of a sudden you were the senior person in that group. I wanted to say, I think that's been one of my, as Patrick was talking about coast to coast, I was reflecting on how I'm in my 16th year as a board member. And there were some other folks in the room who had just as much energy and enthusiasm, if not more, than me. And it was kind of refreshing to sit back and give them the opportunity to practice being that voice and start to develop their connection and their relationship. Exactly what you were saying, Patrick. So,
Mike,
yeah.
Can I add an example, if I may, just interject here? Thank you.
Please.
And a great example is secure rural schools. Secure rural schools has been on the agenda for multiple years. It lapsed a couple years ago. It wasn't being picked up. It wasn't important to folks across the country, but it's very important to California. Okay, because we actually received the most funding from the Secure Rural Schools Act. Well, again, it had sunsetted, needed to be re-upped. Congress wasn't really paying attention to it, but I am convinced that coast to coast, our efforts there impacted the outcome of Secure Rural Schools, because just last December, okay, the late Congressman Doug LaMalva was able to pick it up on the House side and get it passed. Okay, so that was an example of our advocacy working. Now, Congressman LaMalva unfortunately passed away just about a month after it passed, but he became our champion, I think, because our own champions went to him and said, we need you to champion this issue. And he did. And we ultimately got Secure Rural Schools passed. And that's a large bucket of money for our more rural districts.
And, and I want to thank you, by the way, for honoring my former late congressman. Very connected with his family. And I just wanted to say that as you talk about the relationship, I'm very fortunate in that I have developed that relationship with that office over the many years. And now I won't say that I had anything to do with getting the SRS to pass, but I do feel like the relationship that we had, because he was always very involved in some things around education. It was a concern for him, and having the ability to go in and talk, I got to tell you, it feels pretty good to know that I had that relationship with him. And now our new congressman, I have a relationship with Gallagher as well. And so everything that you're saying is resonating deeply with me. So anything you wanted to add, Chris, because I'm going to let everybody know who this other Mike Walsh character is in a minute. And then I want to talk a little bit about this slide and start to bring Annette and Ramon into this conversation. So is there anything you wanted to add, Chris?
Oh, I'm good.
Perfect. Always to the point. So everybody, Dr. Ramon Flores is down there disguised as Mike Walsh. And one of the things that we all shared, Ramon, was why is this conversation so important that you'll take the time? And I know you're in the middle of being busy right now. So I'd love for you to just take a hot minute and just share why is this conversation so important to you. Then I'm going to draw you and Annette into some of this conversation with this slide that I just put up.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much. I think part of the thing that sometimes is lost on us as county board members is the amount of influence we can exert. First and foremost, by definition, we are a county board. So our trustee area might be by, jurisdiction, but it's a county-wide office. So we've got the opportunity to have influence on a county-wide level. And as was mentioned earlier about the relationships with our both state and federal representatives, whether it's the state senators, state assembly members, regular senators, our Congress people, they fully understand and they get it. Oh, wait a minute. Dr. Flores has a countywide constituency kind of a thing. He has a countywide platform, and we need to make sure we take advantage of that and leverage and flex the influence we have with that. Just a quick note about connections, networks, and relationships. It's a cliche, right? One way to know the president of the Senate pro tem, is to know them before they're the president of the Senate. So I was fortunate enough to know Monique Limon when she was Monique Limon, trustee of Santa Barbara Unified School District, then Monique Limon, member of the Assembly, and now Monique Limon, Senator pro tem. So if I was to pick up the phone and call her, she knows who I am because we've got that relationship. Similarly with my Congresswoman, before I knew her as Congresswoman Brownlee, she was State Assembly member Brownlee. Before that, she was Santa Monica Unified School District trustee Brownlee, and I got to know her in that capacity. So you build those relationships, those connections before they get into office, and then once they're into office, because again they understand that we have a county-wide perspective, our county-wide platform, they're more than likely to pick up the phone or return that email. Over, Mike.
Great, perfect. So here's where I'm going to go with this. Because really what Patrick and Chris have been describing for us is really the external advocacy that I think most people think of when we talk about advocate. This is the stuff that usually comes to mind is how we're influencing policy and legislation and funding. Who are the legislators that we're having conversations with? But I think there's the other side of this coin that we don't often understand the power of it. And I think you're kind of alluding to it, Ramon, when you talk about this countywide platform that we have. And Chris, I've forgotten now whether it was Chris or whether it was Patrick that mentioned our influence. And I think this is where some of that influence comes to play. So Annette, I'm going to start with you. because this representative advocacy is what I kind of like to think of as if we're going to advocate and we're going to explain things to folks in DC or in Sacramento, we probably should have a really good idea of what we're talking about and where do we get that information from, so our people. So I want to talk a little bit about this representative advocacy where we're hearing community voices, especially for us as county board members, the students that are least heard, most at promise. I would love to know, what have you started to really understand or have been at your perspective, how has it grown and changed as you've gotten community input, as you've heard from students, families, community members? What have been some things for you that have kind of shaped your perspective of things?
I'm going to say one of the first things I've learned, and I venture to guess all those attendees here from the county boards are looking at the same thing, is a lot of people do not understand what we have influence over and what we do and don't do. I think that when it comes to community input, sometimes they come to us with concerns that we have very little to do with when it comes to handling it. But what it does is it shows us how much we need to be putting forth the purpose of the county board and the county office. But then when we hear from these people who are often concerned about something going on in the local schools, it's our place to help to guide them to become an advocate for their students. And that is one of the things I have been doing for these years, is letting them know, here is what you as a parent or caregiver can be doing. But then I take that information and I share that information about the concerns that they have with the appropriate individuals, such as today's my news feed is just exploding with parents concerned about special education. And what's going to happen, because now the Federal Department of Education is being split into various directions. What can we do to help those students who are going to be affected by this? So sharing that information, how they can also become part of that voice to try to make sure that the students, those students that we serve are the most, as you mentioned, at promise, they're the ones who need that support the most. So we have to work to provide the parents that voice, either through us or giving them also the chance to make their voices heard.
I love it. I think that everything you were just saying, I was reminded that those folks usually ask me questions, not in a formal setting. They catch me in the post office or they catch me in the produce section, and they're community members who have these concerns and these questions because they know that I'm a board member. And so as far as they're concerned, I should know about everything that's going on and exactly what you're saying. So Ramon, how do you ensure that voices are the voices that are not always heard? How do you make sure that those are being included in as you go out and advocate? How do you, when you're gaining that information, how do you ensure that?
That actually was a great segue. So when I first got on the board in my first term, I realized that there's 5 school districts within my trustee area. So I made it a point to go to those school board meetings during public comments to introduce myself. I'm Ramon Flores. I'm your county representative on the board. If you have issues, questions, concerns, come see me. And then we can, again, as Annette was saying, I help them with that conversation of what we can cover, what we cannot cover. But then similarly, not just the parents' voice, we run what's called the Ventura County School Board Association. We meet 3 times a year, and it's forum for the 20 school district trustees, superintendents, staff. And again, I make it a point to just make sure I sprinkle myself around as many tables to let those trustees know that we do things like run the core community schools. So when these local districts are looking to have an expulsion case before them, I asked them, have you gone to our community school? Do you know where you're sending your students? And shockingly, most of the time the answer is no, we've never heard of that school. We've never visited that school. So I give them an open invitation. We will set up a tour. I will work with staff to set up a tour of where it is you're going to be sending your students because they think it's throwaway school. Shameless plug, the last 3 years, our community school has had 100% graduation rate. So my little model is at graduation, these kids that were at one point 100% expelled, now they're 100% graduated. So letting these trustees know that the kid did bad, they messed up, but sending them to our community schools is probably a good thing, but also letting them aware of what it is we can provide for them. Open invitation, come see the school, come visit the campus, come talk to our administrators, come talk to our faculty so that you know where it is that you're sending your schools. So on the one hand, yes, educating the parents, but also educating those trustees within our county.
All right. So I want to know a little bit about those partnerships, because I'm hearing from both of you that there's opportunity to I'm going to borrow Patrick's language again about educating and activating. So I'm hearing the same theme that's starting to come out of how do we educate our public, the folks who are coming to us, and how do we activate. So, but I know sometimes, and Annette, you alluded to this, sometimes they're bringing things that aren't necessarily in my purview, right? And I know there's also sometimes they're bringing, I had a conversation very recently with someone who had less of an opinion of some of our students. And I had to do a little bit of redirect with that person. So, because some of the things they were offering for suggestions, no, I'm not looking to punish a child. I'm looking to educate a child. And so I'll just kind of leave it at that. But I want to know, so how do you find the ability to balance information that you have coming in that doesn't always fit into where they would like you to take it, while still making decisions that are in the best interest of students? I hear stuff from the public all the time that, yeah, that's not going to graduate another child. So how do you balance that? What's been your secret, Annette?
Listening. Sometimes a parent just wants somebody to listen to their concerns. We know we can't fix everybody's problems, but oftentimes the first thing they're saying is, I've tried talking to the local school. I've done this, I've done that, but nobody is listening. So the one thing we really have to do is listen, give them the tools to do what they need to do, and make sure they feel heard. That is one of the biggest complaints I think I've seen when people come to me with something that I don't handle, is nobody cares. Knowing that somebody cares enough, may not have the answer that you want, but knowing that and being honest and upfront with them. Don't offer something you cannot provide. That transparency is an important part of it, because oftentimes parents and other guardians are given pat answers that aren't going to work. But giving them the tools to do what they need to do is a key thing.
I love it. Ramon, your turn.
No, that was great. You've heard the cliche, listening to understand instead of listening to respond. As a practicing engineer, I struggle with that because I get paid to respond. But no, listening with empathy is so important. And part of that, something that comes with that, is also having a knowledge base, educating ourselves. In my first term in office, I made it a point to go to every single graduation of our kids that were expelled, the kids that were incarcerated. And again, at least in Ventura County, the kids that are incarcerated, it's not in June like normal. It's whenever their sentence is up, which could be throughout the school year. But also going to the different schools. We run this. Besides the core and community schools, we run special education, understanding, okay, this is the school for social emotional issues. This is the school for cognitive issues. Getting to know the faculty, getting to know the administrators, so that when parents come up to us, we can say, oh yeah, you know what, maybe this school is better than that school, or more, not better, more appropriate based on the circumstances that the families are experiencing, but making ourselves well educated. I've met, unfortunately, too many trustees who think that them coming to the board meeting once a month, they've met their requirements. It's being as engaged as an active as you want to be, but the more engaged you are, the more educated you are, and the more of a resource you can be to, again, not just the parents, but also our fellow trustees at the local school districts. So being well educated, and then to Annette's point, knowing when to respond versus when to just listen.
Love it. Love it. I think this thing around listening, we forget what that is like to actually hear, because sometimes there is a reflex that we must jump in and solve a problem. And what I have not heard from you and Annette both is that you have to jump in and solve a problem. I've heard you talk about hearing the problem, connecting folks to who they should be talking to, and making sure they have the capacity to do that work as well. Love those answers. That keeps me, I follow that advice. It keeps me out of trouble. I love that. Annette, what were you getting ready to add? And then I'm gonna bring Patrick and Chris back in.
Reflecting on what Ramon had said, knowing the programs that we've got is a key thing. Oftentimes when we have something like an transfer appeal come up, sometimes we look at what the parents are saying about the child and realize perhaps our programs would be better suited for the student. And while it is not our place to determine that, we do encourage our staff to reach out to the parent and say, perhaps our community school would be a better choice than moving your child to this other town. So it just kind of hit me when Ramon had said that it's like, this is part of our job too. In a way, it's an advocacy where we ask the staff to present it to the parents and help to have them find the tools they need to support their student.
Perfect. All right. So Chris, Patrick, I'm going to start to wind this down now. I'd love for each of you to give the advice. What advice would you give? And I think I'm hearing parts of it sprinkled all over the place, but I want to pull it together now. What advice would you give a new trustee who wants to become a stronger advocate? There's some folks who have been doing this for a while, some just brand new at it. They've never done it yet. What advice would you give them?
First I would say look for your CSBA emails. We often email out action alerts, and those alerts speak to potential legislation that might be harmful, might be good for our membership, also budgetary matters, sometimes even regulatory matters. And that happens actually at the state, and those speak to the state and federal level. So watch for what we do. I would also say look for our advocacy training opportunities, certainly at AEC and sometimes in between. Okay, we offer opportunities, folks, to learn how to be better advocates, right? But chief among this, though, is I wouldn't be afraid. Just do it, right? What is the Nike thing, the swoosh, right? Just do it, because you can do this. This is not rocket science. Sometimes people are a little hesitant to pick up that phone and really engage. Do not be afraid to do that. And a lot of legislative staff, quite frankly, expect you to do that and want you to do that. They want to hear from you. So just backing up, though, something we didn't talk about is what do we do? What does governmental relations do? We represent you in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. So if you have things that on the legislative front, budgetary front, that are of concern to you, or you want to engage in, or need some advice on, or want some advocacy on the grander level, please engage us. We are here for you throughout the year. Send us an email, p.o'donnell@csba.org, and there's Chris too. You can look it up on our website if you need to, but don't be afraid to engage us. Or if you're going to meet with a legislator, and you're thinking, wait, gee, what issues should I bring up with them? Don't be afraid to reach out to us. We're here all year long. This is what we do. We are here for you. We are here to serve you. So if you need a starting point, you don't know what to do, just reach out to us. We'll help you. We'll guide you. And I'll just turn it over to Chris then.
And I would also encourage you to stay in touch with your PACER, your public affairs and community engagement representative. I know some of them are actually watching this webinar right now. They are your boots on the ground. Great. They are all very much experienced and bring their own lived experience in public education and advocating for public education. So, do call on them as well. We work with them regularly. They're part of our team. We're part of theirs. And I just want to kind of build also in terms of something that Ramon said, right? In terms of getting to know, folks, your own colleagues, if you will, and also in terms of how you operate and bring folks in to help them become more aware and familiar with the important services that you guys provide. First of all, I've had a number of, current legislators who were school board members who were on our legislative committee, or were on our delegate assembly, or were on our board of governors, for example, or board of directors, right? These are folks who come through, CSBA's system, if you will, and have, gone on to higher office. Most recently, I know Ramon talked about Pro Tem Limon, but we also there's also Dr. Darshana Patel, who many of you know, that was a Poway Unified School Board member for 2 years, 2 terms, I should say, and then ran for state assembly and is now the chair of the Assembly Education Committee. Prior to her, you had Assembly Member Almer Suchi, a 2-term school board member from Torrance Unified, who was chair of the Assembly Education Committee. And we have a number of other school board members who have served in various capacities in CSBA and in other public education capacities who are now in the legislature, right? And those are relationships that develop over time. So yes, those take time and it takes investment, but those are critical. And in terms of the how can you effectuate your advocacy now, and what are the first things can you do? One is site visits are key. I cannot tell you how important those are. As a former staff person of a district office, so I started as a field rep in San Diego, working for an assembly member, and of course, everyone's going to think that they are an expert in public education because they went to school. But that couldn't be further from the truth, right? So take the opportunity to get to know not just your assembly member and senators locally, but also their staff. Yes, they might only be there for a year or 2 or 3, but they too will go on to be, a leader in their community, most likely, right? I was a field rep at one point. I had school board members and superintendents take me under their wing and show me the ropes of how public education works, why certain things needed to be addressed. They took me and showed me, school sites and things that need to be improved and how things are funded. And that is how I learned, right? And here I am now advocating on your behalf in the legislature. So, these are when I'm talking about balance and then talking about these adjustments, these are what I'm talking about. It takes time and it takes continued investment. So do take advantage of those opportunities to build those relationships, because even though the staff are going to be young, they will go on and grow to be great, leaders in their community, and they will count you as their mentor, as someone that they can rely on. Because those types of relationships are far and few between, unfortunately, today, especially as we've kind of entered in this world of polarized politics and hyper-partisan politics. So take that opportunity to build those relationships on the individual level. It'll pay off dividends as you go further into your service.
Thank you. Now, someone has, it wasn't an answer or a question that they typed in, but they did make a wonderful suggestion. And I'm going to let Ramon and Annette also give their advice. And then if they don't give the advice that I have on the screen right now, I'm going to share it. All right? So, and I feel like this is like that game show. Can you guess the correct information? Anyway, so Annette and Ramon, I would love to know from a trustee's perspective, what do you hope people take away from this conversation about community representatives, being a community representative and I call it an ambassador of public education? What do you hope everybody takes away?
So I want to touch first on the last topic we were talking about, that one of the things I would hope that any school board member knows, the people that you are going to advocate with in the legislature are no better than you, really. They don't know how to put it right. They are a human being who's just decided to move into another realm to hopefully help to serve the communities. They were once just a regular person with some with children, and they decided to move into that realm to help. You may be there soon. As mentioned, many of our people who have been in CSBA or on school boards are in the legislature. One of my fellow board members is currently Assembly Member Ana Maria Avila Farias, and she was elected to serve right straight from the County Board of Education. So we have those people that we've known. And I'm going to touch on the question you've got here, if I may, the question about reaching out. It's many of the people who are currently on the school boards within my county. Actually, I met through PTA. They were PTA leaders or parent club leaders. And we know each other through that. And there is this unique combination of individuals that work together for the students. So the person who has suggested reaching out to the local school district, the PTAs, the foundations, that work is going on in many areas already. And we do share. We just don't always think about it as being that we are doing our advocacy work when we're chatting with our friends from so long ago. So it's there. It's just not something that we maybe have compartmentalized into being that this is part of our responsibility to advocate.
Perfect. Love that.
And if
Ramon.
I could, just
go
I
ahead.
just want to say
Sure.
one thing real fast, and to build off what Annette just said, don't forget, yes, you are a constituent of your legislator, but they're a constituent of yours.
Exactly.
Ramon, do you have any ability to add to anything that those two just shared? Because I'm out. I got nothing. I mean,
No, I
the
was about to
importance
say
of
ditto.
relationships. Yes.
And Chris, I'm chuckling inside because I cannot remember, or I can't remember. I cannot tell the number of times where, again, now Senator Pro Tem Monique Limon would approach me for an endorsement for her race when she was going through the assembly, kind of a thing. And I'm thinking, really, you want my endorsement? But again, that's the power of connections, relationships, networks. I think sometimes we underestimate the value of that, how important that is. And again, we keep talking about the legislature and at the federal level, but don't forget local. One of our county supervisors is a former school district trustee that, again, she came to me for my endorsement. So now she's a supervisor. I feel like I can reach out to her if there's assets, resources, connections that I need from a county perspective, from a county supervisor. So the biggest takeaway for me, networks, relations, connections, but also educate yourself, as Annette was saying, of what it is, are those programs that your county office has. Again, another cliche that I've come across, if you've seen one county office, you've seen one county office. 58 up and down the state, we're all so different in what we offer in terms of programs and services, but just be mindful, be aware of your county office's skill sets, and then that way you can be that knowledge broker that we were hired and elected to be.
It's close to hired, elected. It feels like the same thing. It's a job. All right. So here's what I want to do. I want to wrap up. I want to thank the panelists we had today. Thank you very much. Your perspective on this conversation has been brilliant and valuable. Over the course of this series, we've explored a lot of topics about county board governance. This notion of understanding the unique role of county offices of education and that board superintendent partnership, budgeting, oversight, governance practices. And throughout every discussion, one theme that I think has been consistent: effective governance is ultimately about improving outcomes for students. And that rang deeply with this group today, that it's about relationships that impact those students. And so it's a reminder that governance extends beyond board meetings and policy decisions, and that as advocates, we serve as connectors, listeners, ambassadors for public education, and we help ensure that the voices of students, families, educators, and communities are heard and understood by decision makers at every level. Advocacy is not reserved for a few individuals or limited to visits with legislators. It begins with listening. Annette, you nailed it. That's why I thought she must have saw my closing remarks to say that it starts with that listening. And as all of you have said throughout this, it grows through relationships, and it becomes meaningful when we use our knowledge, experiences, and community connections to advance opportunities for students. Again, it's amazing. I wrote this before we started talking, and everything that you've all shared backs it up 100%. County Board Governance Handbook was created to help trustees bridge policy and practice. My hope is that this series has provided not only information, but also practical ideas and renewed confidence in the important work that you and I do as county board members. Please know that it is not prescriptive by intention. I didn't want this to be, the handbook to be prescriptive, because it can't account for every single event or every single activity or something that's going to happen in your time. It was meant to be as a general guide. And so thank you for joining us throughout this series and for your commitment to public education, student success, and effective governance. Thank you to all of the guests for all 5 of the webinars, especially those of you who have joined me today. And on behalf of CSBA, thank you for being part of this conversation, and thank you for your service to California's students and communities. And finally, remember, to lead, you love; to save, you serve. Thank you for loving and serving. Everybody on this panel, thank you again, bottom of my heart. You're all wonderful people. Everybody, please have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. And that is our show for today.
Great job, Michael, as always.